Welcome to Law Help Australia, where we keep you informed with tips and updates. My name is Emily Tung, and today we're looking into English language tests and migration law. But before we get started, let's find out a little bit about our panel. We've got Mary Bandalan, Dinesh Weerakkody and Nerada Turner. Mary, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a second-year Arts and Law student at Deakin University, and I'm interning at the AED.
And Dinesh, a bit about yourself?
Emily, I've also started at Deakin University in 2000 and got admitted in 2007 to practice law.
And Nerada, we've done some research. We know that you've been practicing in this area for 10 years. You're very experienced. Tell us about your background.
I am. I graduated in 2004 and I've been teaching as a professional teacher since then, and for the last 8 of those years it's been just in IELTS.
So let's get into it then. I guess, are you or do you know someone who's applying for an Australian visa? Did you know you have to prove English language abilities for certain types of visas? And do you know how to do this? Dinesh, what is the English language requirement?
English language requirement is a legal requirement for certain visas, Emily, as you've explained, correctly identified. And for certain visas, if you don't meet the minimum English language threshold as expected in law, you will not be successful in an application.
There are various tests out there, but the one we hear most about is the International English Language Test, or IELTS. Nerada, what is the IELTS test?
So it assesses the 4 macro skills: speaking, reading, listening and writing. But I think the reason why IELTS is so popular is because it does have a human factor. So for the speaking test, there is a professionally trained examiner sitting with the candidate for 12 to 15 minutes to test their speaking abilities.
Wow. How long does the test go for?
3 and a bit hours. Yeah, so the reading, writing and listening are 2 and 40 minutes, and then you have to wait around either on the day or come back another day and do the speaking. So it's quite
tiring.
intense. Yes.
Dinesh, is there a definition of IELTS in law?
Emily, the English language requirement is defined in law. In relation to the English language requirement, we've got vocational English, we've got the competent English language level, we've got the proficient English language level, and we've got the superior English language level. So if you want to find out the level that you want to achieve, so you go to the relevant law and find out exactly the definition. So through the definition you can find out what you need to achieve. I can give an example if you want.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. For example, the 485 temporary graduate visa, the section 212. I'll read it out so people can understand what exactly is required in law. This is how it is explained. The application was accompanied by evidence that the applicant has undertaken an English test specified by the minister in an instrument made for this paragraph and has achieved within the period specified by the minister the score specified by the instrument in accordance with the requirements. So as you can see, reading the law as it is quite a bit complicated, but it does gives, even if you're looking from a layperson's point of view, that the application must be accompanied by evidence of having achieved a specific score in the instrument. In layman's terms. So that means currently for that visa, if someone asks me, don't lodge an application without having achieved the level that you need for the English language test.
So Nerada, as a teacher in this area, what kind of visas are most of your students applying for?
We deal mainly with student visas, so they come to us twice. So they'll come when they're on the student visa to get temporary residency, and that stage they need a Band 6 requirement, and then they come back a year later. The students come back a year later when they need Band 7 to go for permanent residency. That's most of the students.
Dinesh, can you tell us a little bit more about the bands that Nerada's mentioned?
Yes, I might take the same example as I've given you before for 485 example and start with that. Again, the law specifies the language test that they can use. So now it's been expanded to other English language tests like TOEFL or PTE. But the definition of the test for each of these is again defined in law. In relation to IELTS, the minimum overall score of 6 is required, and overall score of 6 is required. So likewise, again, As a lawyer, I can only point to the law to say be familiarized if you're doing IELTS. And also another point is that it must be in one single setting. So you can't sit in different tests and show that you have in each component that you have the required level. So that's an important point.
That can be frustrating for students. That's probably one of the biggest complaints we have. So they work really hard on the writing or the speaking, and then they let the listening drop and then have to go back and do the test again. So it's important that they keep all the 4 skills nice and strong.
It is quite frustrating, isn't it, Neri, because we see some students attempt IELTS 10, 12 times, and in certain component at a particular stage they might achieve a higher standard, for example even 8, and at another point they might achieve just 6 or 5.5. So I see that there is a discrepancy in certain cases, may not be in all cases, but certainly certain cases that I get. So that's where I guess the expertise of a teacher who could tell you, a teacher probably like you, Neri, who could tell the applicant certain techniques on how to achieve the required level as per the law in one sitting.
So then, Nerada, tell us about the test format and how to go about preparing for it.
Okay, so the test comes in 2 modules. You have academic and general. And
what's the difference?
So the speaking and listening is exactly the same, whether you choose or have to do academic or general, but the reading and the writing can differ immensely. So if you do general, the level of language is less sophisticated, the grammatical ranges are fewer than an academic reading or an academic text. With the writing, they both have to do an essay, but there is another section for the general test. The students just have to write a letter, but if it's an academic text, then they have to interpret a diagram and write about a graph. And from a teacher's point of view, the language needs of both are very different, and the graphs are a lot more difficult to the language features of a graph are much more complex than what the language features of a letter are, because a letter is just more like a little bit more like spoken language. So if a student has a choice between general and academic, my personal recommendation, and it's not for everybody, because some people are more comfortable with graphs, would be to go for the general.